most of the people would look, let's buy ammunition companies manufacturing tanks.
It's not like when you were 7 years old, you said, I want to grow up and run a defense company. How long does it typically take you to get up to speed?
The first 15 years of my professional life, so I got my degrees in law and accounting.
CEOs in foreign countries, what is the draw to the U.S. capital markets?
In the U.S., there's just
and welcome to the podcast. So today we have a guest all the way from Israel, which I'm really excited about. And I'm going to embarrass Menny for a minute with this introduction. He and I met probably, it's easily a couple of years ago. And we met in New York City. I come into this hotel lobby in downtown, and we started talking, and I hear about some of his success stories. I couldn't help myself ask him the following question. I'm like, how do you do it? You know, you've got, this investment and this fund and this success story. What's the secret sauce, right? Everybody that's listening to this podcast right now wants to know what's the secret sauce to be successful. And he said very humbly, very simply, he's like, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. And I was like, okay, I've heard that line before. Let's move on. So Menny and I talk, we start to exchange war stories in the capital markets. And I learned the following, and listen carefully. I learned that he's a huge success in Israel. He went to law school in Israel. He then, I think, went to law school in the U.S. I'll get the specifics. Then he got an LLM. Then he ran a fund. And at some point, I was just like, Menny, wait a second. Not only you're not the smartest guy in this room, you're the smartest guy in this room, but you're the smartest guy probably in every room that you go to with all those degrees. And I learned that he is, in fact, one of the smartest guys I've met in capital markets. But I've also learned he's extremely humble, extremely open-minded. And with that, I'll stop embarrassing him. Menny Shalom, thank you for your time and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Seth. Great having you here. Sorry for all those inaccurate statements you made about me, but thank you for everything and happy to be here and answer whatever I can.
Great. Well, I think just keeping in mind that our audience is basically going to go from two perspectives. Number one, they would love to hear what you're up to now. We'll talk about that. But also, what is the journey to get to someone that's in your position right now? I know you're juggling a couple different things. So if someone were to meet you on the street today and say, hey, Menny, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me what you're working on. Give us a little bit of background of where you are today. And then we'll go backwards in terms of the journey itself.
Very good. So today I'm doing 2 or 3 deals, hoping to be public deals within the next couple of quarters. One of them, the one I've been doing for the last 3 years, is Motomova. It's in the business of testing electric motors for the electric vehicle industry. It's a very interesting company. When we talk about the route getting there, the journey, I'll tell you how I got there, but it's a very interesting business that started in Israel. And basically what it does, we manufacture testing equipment for the electric vehicle industry. And I was in the right time, at the right place, and being able to put that asset into a company in the OTC and having good people and good partners and service providers around me, and now being able to push it towards a national exchange. So this is the very big thing I'm working on. The war in Israel was not very helpful and supportive to the underlying business itself. I was supposed to be in a very big event, October 10th of last year.
Oh, wow.
Just 3 days. I had my tickets for October 8th, and the war started on October 7th. So everything that mixed, and the business was affected. Our people went into the reserve forces, and we were affected by customers and suppliers and everything. But for good reasons, we were able to retrack ourselves into that thing, and we hope to be able to complete that process within a couple of quarters. The second thing was also a result of the Israeli war. At the beginning of the war, a very dear friend of mine, who I knew for a few years, passed away as a result of the war. He got a heart attack from what he saw on TV. Yeah, and he had a very interesting, relatively small, but interesting defense company in Israel. And I was asked to come and help to restore the business. I made some loan into the business, and then I acquired the business. And it took me a few weeks to realize the world is heading into a very interesting quote unquote time where tension in Russia and Ukraine and China and the US and war in Israel and a lot of other tension worldwide. At that time, a Republican administration seemed pretty coming up front. So, and usually at Republican administration, defense sector is doing better than others. So all that came and led me to a conclusion that defense is probably here to stay. And I tried thinking about acquiring defense companies and maybe raising money from the capital markets in the US. So that's the second thing. And as part of dealing with a lot of defense, I was approached by several investors and investment houses about maybe doing a SPAC in the defense world where we acquire a large target. So those are the things that I've been doing and I've been focusing on in the last, in current times and the next couple of quarters.
So one thing is very clear is that you don't get much sleep if you're juggling all these different ventures at the same time. But actually, there's a tremendous amount of to unpack, as they say, in terms of some of the things that you just said. I think that the first thing that's fascinating is, and I guess that'll segue into your background. One of the things that I'm always amazed at at VStock, I work with a couple of hundred companies, a lot of IPOs, a lot of foreign issuers. And one thing that I'm always amazed at is that for CEOs in foreign countries, that some of them don't even speak the language. Obviously, your English is fantastic. But even for those CEOs that don't speak the language, like what is the draw to the U.S. capital markets that has led you to go down that route for Motomova on the OTC and maybe on the NASDAQ, Start 26, maybe a SPAC? In other words, why aren't you focused on the Israeli capital markets? What's the draw to the U.S.? And then how do you just educate yourself about all these different routes, and what has that been like?
So the Israeli capital markets, well, very similarly to most of European capital markets, is a very concentrated one. Not a lot of companies. Most of the companies are controlled by 8 or 10 different institutions and or other 15 or 20 families. So it's a very, very concentrated, not well developed. It's legally and regulation-wise, it's very similar to the US, but money-wise, magnitude-wise, it's not as big. Not a lot of big issuers, and it's a relatively small market, relatively easy to manipulate, and the same applies to the capital markets in France and Italy and Germany, Spain. I think. So two things draw me to the U.S. markets. First, I think the fact that I did my first master's degree in the U.S. That was 25 years ago, Columbia University. Nobody's perfect. You get to know the system, you get to understand regulation, you get to understand the players in the market, and you realize this is a huge market, meaning there is room for very big guys and very small guys. There is room for that type of companies and the other type of companies. So it's a very big market. It's huge money-wise. It's huge player-wise. There are so many different type of investors. There are so many investors, individual investors. There are so many ways of cutting, slicing, and dicing the market in so many ways. So the opportunity is huge. I mean, you can bring good assets or good companies to the market. There is a relatively good chance that a group of investors would say, this is interesting for us. You will be able to find comparable companies. You will be able to find similar or sector-wise that you would trade in. And this is something which is very difficult to find in other places. Obviously, Asian markets are not as open as we would like them to be. So it's less of a relevant for me. And in the US, there's just so many players, and you'll be able to connect. So I think that's a very interesting thing. I think the second thing is that this is where you have a real chance. Meaning, if you have good asset in hand, you have your day. I cannot say the same about the Israeli market. In the Israeli market, there are a lot of barriers which are external that you cannot really control. Here, if you have a good asset, it may take you some time. You need to struggle with the audits. You need to struggle with the lawyers. You need to struggle with with going forward. But
Notice how you said you didn't have to struggle with the transfer agent. Let's keep that with the lawyers and the auditors. Transfer agents.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. But the rules are known, regulation is known, you have enough of savvy people who can help you get there. And it's a matter of effort. It's not simple. It's not easy, but if you push, you would get there one way or the other if you play by the rules. I mean, that's the thing. So it's a huge market. Regulation is relatively well known, well defined. Service providers are good quality. You need to pay and you get good advice and you get good work. So it's a matter of effort of making that happen. And I cannot say the same thing about other markets. I think that's the main thing for me personally. This is my second home. I visit US every other month, sometimes every month.
And that's important. That's important. When you talk about the effort, like it's not a matter of just sitting there and in today's environment just zooming. I mean, it's back and forth and it's tireless.
I think so. I mean, I like zooming. I like saving the time. I like saving the trouble. But there are some things you cannot really do remotely. I think this is one of them. Some CEOs tend to be very focused on the business. They don't understand much about the actual thing and the documents and the processes and everything. For me, as a curious person, and you asked that before,
right?
I need to know everything. And I need to know not just what's going on, I need to know better than my lawyers and my auditors. I remember in the first SEC filing I did with another company of mine, we got some feedback from the SEC accounting examiner, and like got a call with the auditors and with the accountants, the lawyer. Nobody really said anything smart. So I took the letter. I went online. I read it. I have legal and accounting degrees, so it makes things easier.
Right.
And I called the SEC examiner myself, and I said, "Hi, this is me. I saw your," and I wanted to explain the issues. And it took me 7 or 8 minutes, and that was resolved. And it was like 45 minutes of people talking about everything. So for me, it's about controlling the details. And I understand some CEOs don't have the background like I do, and maybe don't have the tools or ways of educating themselves, which is fine. And they would trust their advisors. I think at the end of the day, if you really want to make it a good story and a good journey, meaning good, both successful, but also you enjoy it, not just you manage it, you need to understand the tweaks, the when, the how. You have to have your opinion about things. You cannot just say everybody will tell you, hey, just let's do it this way. There are alternatives for that. I always like to understand all alternatives before I make a decision. And it takes a toll. You don't sleep much, okay? So you need to spend time reading and writing and educating yourself. I enjoy it. This is part of, for me, that I enjoy doing. So for me, it's something I'm happy to do.
And let me ask you this as a segue. In other words, so I agree with you. Not many people have that background, which certainly gives you an advantage. But there are many CEOs that we've interviewed on this podcast that, in other words, let's say they were raised in a certain field, let's say in medtech, and they had this passion for this device to change the world, and then they spent 15 years, focused on that. Clearly with you, it's not like when you were 7 years old, you said, I want to grow up and run a defense company when I grow up, or a electric car battery company. These are very different types of companies that you've acquired the knowledge and the information. How does that work? In other words, you're brought into a fresh industry with, really no experience per se in defense technology, or in electric cars. Maybe you drive one, but how long does it typically take you to get up to speed to serve as management of a new company in a new industry?
So the first 15 years of my professional life, so I got my degrees in law and accounting, and then I got my master's degree in law in the US, and then I got my second master in finance and banking. And I gave my mother...
Once again, now you're the smartest guy in the Zoom and of everybody listening, but go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
I gave my mother all those diplomas. I basically went and did startup companies for 15 years where I actually created products and raised money and created teams and built and failed and succeeded. In the last 5-7 years, I've been doing distressed assets. So companies reached into a certain ceiling glass, whether good or bad reason, usually bad, no cash flow, bad management, the owner passed away, the owners got divorced or wanted to separate, and I came into play, and in both cases, high tech and distressed assets, there is an overstretch, meaning that you have way more tasks to do than you have resources. The number two is both of them are in a flipping point. The high tech, you grow very fast. Distress, you fail very fast. But in both cases, you need to learn in a very short period of time the business, the market, the competition, the technology, the legal, the accounting, and everything. And you need to make informed decisions in a very short period of time. So basically, just besides the angle, failing or growing, everything is the same. And you need to understand industries in really days in order to make a decision where you want to buy it or not, or anything. So for me, again, it goes back to the base of being able and enjoying learning. So you come into a new business, you need to understand everything. You need to understand that people sometimes are not accurate with their statements. Sometimes the financial statements are not accurate with the statements. The bank statements are not, like, everything is under question mark, and you need to make a very fast decision whether you buy it or not. And after you need to buy it, and as part of making that decision, you need to understand what you're going to do with it, because just buying an asset and sitting in an asset is not at that. So it develops the muscles of learning and thinking and learning and thinking and learning and thinking. And again, for me, the capital markets being out there is part of the consideration. Is this an asset that could be relevant for the capital markets in 2, 3, 5 years from today? Not necessarily today, but this is also a basic consideration, because I see capital markets as one of the options of taking this business forward. And yeah, that's how I got there.
In terms of recognizing the relevance, like you said, the relevance of an asset, obviously we were all affected, some in more ways than others, with the events of October 7th. Can't imagine, living there, even though I have relatives and kids there, from a business standpoint, and yet on top of all that, you're supposed to successfully be able to run your business. I feel like when you talk about defense technology, in some ways, it's like the opportunity where, as horrible as COVID was on a personal level, on a professional level, there are some companies that absolutely thrived and were able to take advantage of those events. I don't think anybody would disagree that, based on recent events worldwide, that defense technology, is an extremely interesting area. Can you elaborate, only what you're able to, on some of the types of technologies that either you've been involved with, acquired, or looking at? What type of technologies are we talking about?
So defense is a very, very broad concept. It starts with what people have in mind usually is the very core military application, like weapons or ammunition, missiles, This is 1 or 2% of that. Okay, the rest is there are so many of them, and I'll tell you where I find most interesting. But usually, some companies divide it according to air and sea and ground. Some companies divide it between communication and vehicles and supporting stuff. Some of that is being divided. So it's being divided in so many different ways. What I'm looking at is the ripple effect, meaning assuming there is tension worldwide, how does that affect many different circles or layers of life? Obviously, this country needs to fight back, so they will need to have drones and tanks and ammunitions. But also, if those people are being attacked, let's take Russia and Ukraine, and Russia would fight back and affect the electricity grid. So they would need generators, and they would need lightning, and they would need medical devices. So when we think of defense, it's not just what's on the battlefield, it's also what the business sector would need, the government sector would need, the people behind it need as a result of the increased tension in the military. And all those creates a lot of different opportunities, not just, again, buying ammunition companies or drone companies, which are very interesting. But there are a lot of different additional sectors that are being affected. So you go today in Israel, and because of the war, all the municipalities, they need to buy a lot of different equipment for different times in case something happens. That creates huge demand for those products and services. If the electricity grid goes off, every supermarket, every garage, they need something to back up for the milk in the fridge, or right, the medicines in the fridge.
Right. We don't always think of those angles. Absolutely.
So those angles are the ones that I find interesting. Those are the indirect effects of the military tensions worldwide. And I find them interesting for two reasons. First, they're huge in effect. I mean, the war affects 50,000 soldiers, but 8 million people needs to have lightning and support and electricity and so on and so forth. So the demand is much bigger. And the second thing is, most of the people would look on the first thing, let's buy ammunition companies or companies manufacturing tanks. I would think about the companies making the metal for the tanks, because they would have way bigger demand. So I'm trying to think where other people would not look at, and where it's still very, very big opportunity. So I would look into infrastructure companies that would bring metal processing into the world, or companies that solve communication issues, regardless if it's an airplane, or submarine, a tank, and so on and so forth.
So you're looking to zig when everybody else is looking to zag. That's the secret. You know, when you focus on so many of the details of the business itself, and then you also, by choice, are focused on the details of compliance, whether it's the lawyers or the auditors or the accountants. I think one question that a lot of our issuers would love to hear your take on is as follows. So even if you're not yet on a national exchange, or whether it's NASDAQ, New York Stock Exchange, it's safe to say that you're essentially wearing two hats right now. Well, maybe 30 hats, but you're wearing the hat of running the company. But equally as important is wearing the hat of raising capital. How do you do both? Do you prioritize one over the other? What do you do, and what advice might you have for somebody that needs to go down both paths at the same time?
So yeah, definitely challenging and struggling.
That was a big sigh. I don't know if all the listeners heard that, but that was a big sigh.
Indeed.
No,
it's a daily thing that sits in front of me saying, okay, how do you prioritize? And for me, again, it's about, keeping the eyes on the ball. If the ball is to get public, is that we need to have our filing done. We need to have our financials done. This is the first priority. We need to do that in order for us to get the money and grow the business. At the end of the day, we will need to grow the business. However, if we forget or fail to run our underlying business, we won't have anything interesting to sell. So you have to do both. There is no real way of doing one without doing the other. I think you need to have good people around you, smarter than you, faster than you, more detailed than you, because otherwise someone needs to keep track of the underlying specific tasks of making sure this guy did what he's supposed to be doing, the sales is doing, operations is working, legal is doing. It's a big challenge, and there are not a lot of cutting corners there. You have to do what you have to do. Again, there are some service providers that are help you providing project management. They oversee that. I don't really believe they could be helpful, but they cannot replace you doing that. Sure. At the end of the day, you need to sign something you believe in the document, in the deck. The investor wants to see you. They want to see how you talk about the market. They want to see how you talk about your clients, how you grow the business. And if someone else writes your deck without you doing that,
sure,
the details, you're not mastering it. It shows. People will say, oh, okay, he's sending us a third-party deck or whatever. I don't believe in that. I don't think it's real. So I think it's a matter of getting good help and support. But at the end of the day, you have to do two tasks or two jobs at once. There is no other way of doing that.
Do you find, and I do want to be mindful of your time, so as we start to wrap it up, let me ask you this. Do you find over the last 6 to 12 months that the U.S. investors or capital markets community is excited about the opportunities that are coming out of Israel from a tech, AI, just, in general? Are they excited about the opportunities to invest in Israeli-based companies?
I think so. I think there are, but like many investors, I see a lot of trend seeking, meaning they are listening or looking for some buzzwords of trying to understand that. Like in any other industry, I see a lot of gatekeepers. Some of them are relatively superficial. A lot of them are very detailed. Some of them are way too detailed. They're not doing anything just because they're overthinking. But I see a lot of interest, yes, coming from the U.S. side to the Israeli side, a lot of relatively good, successful things. It's also mixed with concern because Israel today is in war, so they're concerned if this is the right time to invest in that economy. Statistics shows that usually best companies and startups started their operation during this wartime on this period of time. So I do think timing is right. Obviously, you need to be prudent about what you're investing in and
sure,
how you evaluating things. But I think timing-wise is right, and there are a lot of very interesting opportunities now.
Well, I hope that obviously I'd love to stay in touch, and you'll come back and give us part 2 in 6 months or 12 months with some amazing updates. In the meantime, I know through many of our discussions, if anybody wants to find you or get some information on you, they can easily go on LinkedIn. But is there an email address or a website you want to leave people with if they wanted to learn more about either you or the companies you're involved with?
So yeah, I think LinkedIn is the best. You can see everything everything I've been doing there. And as you said, Motomova and Star 26 are the 2 companies I'm leading right now towards becoming public and getting exposure. So definitely.
I guess we'll see you at the bell ringing, either ceremony or ceremonies. Hopefully they'll both go. So thank you for your time. And we appreciate all the nuggets of data that you were able to share with us, and look forward to being in touch in the near future. Thanks, Menny. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.